While the modern Super Smash Bros. Titles have started to provide a bit more leeway towards the design space that normal moves and aerials are allowed to occupy, special moves still tend to be the most diverse tools that a character will have on their kit, and are also often where they'll access a lot of the signature abilities from their home series. I've discussed what I consider to be some of the best designed characters overall in the past, but today I want to break down what I consider to be some of the best designed special moves in particular that Ultimate has ever seen. These are the moves that, through some combination of creating fun play patterns, paying good homage to the character's canonical appearances, and being well balanced for the rest of its accompanying moveset and Ultimate's environment overall, unquestionably understood the assignment as seen through my eyes. This video's title gets the spirit of the idea across, but I intentionally haven't formatted it as a numbered list because it's not supposed to be a definitive statement, or even necessarily an attempt to give a definitive statement of my point of view. The goal here is simply to highlight a handful of special moves with designs I admire, representing a broad range of functionality and sourced from a wide array of different archetypes, and discuss why I feel they succeed. Of course, none of this will be universal, as my vision for the game won't be the same as yours, so let me know any moves that you think deserve to be in the conversation as well. Let's do it. This video is sponsored by HelloFresh, and right off the bat, this is an actual screen capture of me just deciding to continue on with them as a customer on my own time after trying them out for the sponsorship. They obviously didn't ask me to do that, and I can't give a stronger endorsement. HelloFresh is a service that delivers recipes and fresh, pre-portioned meal ingredients straight to your door, and I'll admit there was some room for skepticism over ordering fresh produce from the internet, but no. The quality control here is genuinely fantastic. Just look at how beautiful these sweet potatoes are. It helps that HelloFresh always sources their ingredients from farms to your doorstep in under a week, shipped in more than enough ice to preserve your delivery all day long. I'm a YouTuber living with a teacher, obviously two very different worlds, but one thing that they have in common is that we both tend to work very long hours. Now, we are reasonably good about healthy eating, but if I'm being honest, we tend to maintain this by just making the same couple of things over and over, because constantly hunting for new recipes and running off to strange parts of the grocery store gets exhausting. On the other hand, the recipe and ingredients for this delicious Mexican black bean, beef, and sweet potato chili with fresh cilantro just showed up on our doorstep, and it struck a perfect balance between fancier than I'd come up with myself, but not so fancy as to be hard to make. The same can be said for the chicken schnitzel and spinach salad we made the next night, and the pork spring roll inspired bowls after that. It's a whole lot healthier and cheaper than restaurant delivery, and you still get to stay in and try fun new foods. HelloFresh will automatically select several meals for the week that they think you'll like, but if you're not feeling it, it's easy to customize your order. This can be replacing entire dishes, swapping or adding proteins, opting for Carb Smart or Calorie Smart options, adding snacks and desserts with HelloFresh Market, or choosing their quick and easy recipes for even more of a low-effort home cooking experience. If you want to check out HelloFresh for yourself, be sure to use the QR code on screen or my link in the description and pinned comment for a special discount. In previous Smash titles, Sheik's Needle Storm had more use cases than some projectiles, but was still primarily known as an oppressive defensive tool for opponents to try and navigate around. This isn't a role that Ultimate removed, but a substantial reduction to the needle's damage and range did tone down her ability to hide behind them, a harsh aspect of her kit to lose. She was then compensated, however, with some excellent boosts to the needle's speed, which turned them into an interesting and extremely versatile offensive powerhouse, now being possible to employ in a myriad of new situations, including during any stage of a combo. Chargeable, storable projectiles are almost universally extremely strong among the Smash roster, and needles are a variant that can be used in even more scenarios than usual, and yet while they're certainly very powerful, they simultaneously feel less aggravating to face down than the majority of their peers, as the most textbook use case for them doesn't grant much reward besides stage positioning. Make no mistake, stage positioning is an extremely valuable thing to be able to claim, but fully capitalizing on it requires ingenuity and interaction from the Sheik player even after connection. A far cry from the instant death or automatic canned combos that most similar moves are known for leading into. Getting the best possible rewards from landing Needle Storm raw requires Sheik to maneuver into specific positions relative to her opponent, giving the move an unusually high skill ceiling, and being able to go into it out of various combo starters is a powerful trait that, nevertheless, still requires her to interact with her opponent at opportune times. And, like its peers, Needle Storm also allows for advanced techniques like B reversing, wave bouncing, and quick canceling, which she's exceptionally well set up to take advantage of with her already stellar mobility. She's one of the characters in Ultimate most associated with some of these techniques. Sheik's overall design direction in Ultimate is oriented around an expressive toolkit that encourages creativity and excels in many different areas after being optimized, but is balanced around the demands of that optimization, a lack of range compared to many of her competitors, and a reliance on very precise sequences in order to take stocks. I consider this to be a very successful design overall for her, and it's one that Needlestorm seems to have been approached with. A projectile that provides seemingly everything besides sheer power is a dangerous prospect, and again, much like with the character herself, the developers had to walk a fine line here and see how the move progressed over time, before eventually deciding to massage it through balance patches into its final, stronger incarnation. It's now a projectile that directly rewards player skill and innovation in a way that few can replicate, is strong at the moment and will only become stronger over time, still provides everything except sheer power, and despite all of that, it feels fair. Moving from a very complex tool to an exceptionally simple one, Ike's Quick Draw is little more than a dash forward with a hitbox attached to the end. And yet, this is all that's needed to convey exactly what the character represents in Ultimate. Ike is intentionally kept extremely bare bones, arguably being the most straightforward character in the entire game to play, and these kinds of characters are important to have in any type of fighting game. In between mixing up between neutral air and grab on an opponent's shield, juggling with up air, edgeguarding with ether, the usual flowchart that Ike is known for, the ability to use Quick Draw at any point, and the decision of exactly when the risk-reward of doing so is appropriate, is one of the things that really distinguishes Ike players' personal styles, as well as their understanding of their opponent and opponent's character, all while relying purely on the same fundamentals of space control that his kit encourages. It's laggy, there's no armor, no invincibility, it's never going to cross up a shield. Using Quick Draw irresponsibly will get you punished every time. When an Ike player is in their opponent's head, though, it's a move that makes the floor feel like lava. If we turn our eyes towards baseball, then Quick Draw is stealing a base. In Hearthstone, Quick Draw is giving up board control to attack your opponent in the face. Quick Draw is the declaration, "I'm breaking tempo because I know you can't stop me." At the same time, like with giving up stability on the field or the board, the loss of stability on stage isn't done as some outrageous Hail Mary that's only intended to show off. The prevailing strategy for Ike players will still be to stick to safer aerials and tilts throughout a match, but Quick Draw offers a degree of coverage that nothing else on his kit can match, and the question of whether to tap into that coverage looms constantly. Fan games often give Quick Draw additional functionality like the ability to jump cancel it, turning it into a well-rounded and powerful mobility tool, but for Ultimate, I think the blunt object approach is a perfect complement to Ike's overall gameplay direction. It still does act as his one advanced mobility tool though, as using it at the proper height above the ground will enable lag-free landings. It's very easy to pull off as far as advanced techniques go, and is appropriately accompanied with only modest use case and reward, allowing for a bit more skill expression while still reinforcing the fact that Ike is aggressively designed as a non-technical, fundamentals-oriented character. All of this, and I still haven't even mentioned its primary use case as a recovery tool, which I also think is handled well. Its chargeable, instant release nature provides a good opportunity for mix-ups while still being interceptable with a proper callout from the opponent, and once again regularly allows Ike players to opt for the relative safety of going for the ledge, or alternatively going for a risky bypass of the opponent's ledge trapping phase entirely. It's easier to get in the way of than many recoveries, including the ability to block it directly with your body to halt its momentum, but because doing this doesn't put Ike into freefall, the decision of exactly when and how to challenge it is an interesting one for many characters. This is a welcome refinement from its first iteration that sent Ike plummeting if he was intercepted whatsoever, which made counterplay a bit brainless. Modern Quick Draw necessitates more decision making from the opponent without being a near guaranteed return to the stage every time. Offstage play is a cool aspect of platform fighters, and I think if more characters had their recoveries brought down closer to this level, Ultimate would be a better game for it. And as icing on the cake, it's also a fun homage to his canonical appearances that imparts the sense of speed he's known for in Fire Emblem, an aspect that was largely removed in Super Smash Bros. For balance purposes. Along with offstage interactions, another element that I think Ultimate would benefit from is more focus on the grounded aspect of its gameplay. It's no secret that aerials in particular tend to be disproportionately easy to connect and safer if they don't. This puts Terry's Power Wave, a unique grounded projectile, in a bit of a rough spot compared to his traditional 2D fighter origins. And while it's far from the strongest projectile in the game, I think it fulfills its role admirably. It provides truly excellent grounded pressure, either as a fast attack or a slow one that Terry can approach behind, and this is balanced by the specificity of the tools that he has to cover an opponent's reaction to Power Wave. Without something like, say, a reflector to send it back at Terry, an opponent's most common universal option will typically either be to shield or take to the air to get out of harm's way. Terry has strong answers to these: a fast grab, good burst options, but the balance comes from the non-lethal nature of his attacks that grant the widest coverage. Terry can run in with other options to deal with more specific situations in potentially more lethal ways, and the more space he grants himself, the more options he can choose from, but this is of course a two-way street, and additional space allows opponents additional time to prepare their own counterplay to Terry's counterplay. Even setting up the more straightforward pressure scenarios requires some spatial awareness, as Terry needs to fire off Power Wave from a certain range to guarantee enough time to follow behind it. Do it from too close, and not only will it lead to a reduced payoff, it'll also be very easy to punish, vastly warping the risk-reward of the move based on each character's grounded positioning. This additional focus on ground spacing and enforcement of the ongoing rock-paper-scissors dance between shooting a projectile, jumping in, and anti-airing the jump are staple elements of traditional 2D fighters, and it's cool to see them replicated so faithfully here without having to deviate from Terry's canonical tools. It's not that other Smash projectiles ignore these dynamics entirely, but because most of them can also be fired in the air, among other reasons I cover more in depth in this video, Smash Ultimate warps a lot of situations a bit more towards the projectile user's side than I necessarily think is healthy. Terry is in the rare position of, appropriately, only having a grounded projectile, but the developers did account for the more air-centric environment he was transplanted into, and the aerial special now fires a small flame and grants Terry a reversible air stall. Additional movement options in particular are rarely something you're going to hear me complain about, and this treatment strikes a good middle ground between maintaining the spirit of the original attack and allowing Terry to adapt to the reality of his new battlegrounds. Counters have a long and sordid history in the Super Smash Bros. Series, stretching all the way back to Melee, but of the many iterations on the idea we've seen, I think Incineroar delivers by far the most exciting, appropriate, and distinct take. Rather than mirroring and multiplying the incoming blow like most characters, Incineroar's Revenge deals only minor knockback, and instead powers up the next attack he lands himself, still scaling with the strength of the opponent's attack and delivering potentially devastating consequences on contact. The developers were playing with fire here. And it's certainly a dramatic move that can cause unholy amounts of damage and early kills, but all things considered, the kill power boost isn't actually that outrageous for the archetype Incineroar belongs to. Now, damage, admittedly, is a bit of a different story.
Oh my god, 40 on that.
Would you like to eat a 40% nair? Thank you very much for your trouble.
It's a lot, yes, but it's also important to consider that heavyweights have always folded in the neutral game thanks to missile barrages and safe pokes, and in disadvantaged state thanks to their large frames and subpar mobility. And trying to make them work at a competitive level has been a clear struggle of the developers for many years now. Revenge functions as at least a partial solution to both these issues, and the fact that it doesn't give any kind of air stall, which is actually a bit odd for counters, helps out further by leaving Incineroar as at least a bit less of a sitting duck than usual. Without a move like this, opponents would regularly be landing almost free hits which led to as much damage or more as it can do over the course of a game, and in fact, as good as Revenge is, this still happens regularly anyways. The move can still potentially achieve great results, but doing so is fully dependent on the mental sparring between players that makes platform fighters so compelling.
Oh my god!
See you later. That's guaranteed, by the way. That's guaranteed, by the way.
Counterplay master!
That's guaranteed.
I throw the grenade array, no revenge for you, and then I kill you off of it!
Yes.
Wow!
Whether it's activating Revenge, getting hit by a Revenge boosted attack, or avoiding the boost entirely by beating it out or landing a grab, an opponent always maintains at least some amount of control over their fate. So yes, being able to convert it into a 60+ damage command grab is actually a lot more justifiable than it may first appear. Also, keep in mind, you need to subtract the partial damage that Incineroar still takes himself. The Incineroar player also has to resolve a lot of decision trees about exactly when and how to pull the trigger, both in terms of how big a payoff they feel the need to hold out for, and also because hitting a shield while the buff is up will not expend it, but will still deliver increased damage. And in Smash, the damage a move deals to a shield is part of the formula used to calculate how safe it is. Bonus points for also being one of the more successful attempts to convert the mechanics of a Pokémon RPG move into a Super Smash Bros. Moveset. The original move is a simple slow attack that gets more powerful if the Pokémon took damage earlier in the turn, and while Smash Ultimate's incarnation already stands out among a lot of Pokémon moves that don't really echo their home series mechanics in any substantial way, it could still certainly be represented more literally. Just throwing to examples out there, it's easy to picture Revenge being an armored punch that gets stronger if it catches an attack on its armor, or being another command grab that does more damage if Incineroar had lost his last interaction. Neither of these really solve some of the fundamental heavyweight problems that his existing incarnation does though, and I think the developers also managed to create more tense, exciting interactions while still doing a great job maintaining the spirit of the original. Hitting a Pokemon who knows revenge tends to hurt. When compared to our last Pokemon move, Jigglypuff's Rest can't receive the same praise for faithfulness to its home series, as the two incarnations infamously work nothing like each other. Rest in Super Smash Bros. Is a high-risk, high-reward kill move with outrageous knockback and a quick startup, but a tiny hitbox and end leg that little can compare with. Rest in Pokemon is a defensive tool that heals the Pokemon, but also puts it to sleep. That sleeping aspect is the only thing the variants of the move have in common, and despite this, its functionality within Smash has been refined to the point that I think it deserves quite a bit of praise. As you'd expect, the nature of an all-in attack like this makes it difficult to balance, and its power level has fluctuated significantly over the years. By the time of Ultimate, Rest's kill power has been moved to a nice sweet spot of killing early, but not instantly. It puts a damaging flower on the opponent's head, ensuring that there's always strong reward for landing it and making the option of going for non-lethal rests worth considering sometimes, and in a new addition to Ultimate, it also lets her wake up earlier if the rest lands, leading to less of the stock trading scenarios from previous entries, which I never felt fully matched the intuitive risk-reward dynamic from this move. She can still be punished from time to time, and if there was one refinement left I'd want, it would be for Rest to always lead to a consistent type of kill off the top. As is, whether a character is launched and immediately gets to respawn, or has to first wait through a longer KO animation, is determined randomly, and that often decides what an opponent is able to do to Jigglypuff afterwards. They'll often get nothing, and it's rare that they'll be able to get more than a dash attack or uncharged smash attack, but I don't think this should ever be left up to chance. That small hiccup aside, Rest itself has been honed into a solidly designed move, but part of the reason I want to highlight it here also has to do with the way her full moveset has been tuned to interact with it. When Jigglypuff has setups into Rest which are too consistent or initiated too easily, she's a menace. Put her on the other end of the spectrum, and she feels limp and incomplete. Raw Rests, of course, are still available to go for, and will forever be the most impressive way to land the attack, but I feel that a fully realized, functional, and distinctive Jigglypuff should be able to incorporate it more fundamentally into her game plan. She's always been a character of extremes, and part of this lies in the way she takes and deals out hits. Ultimate has struck a fantastic middle ground where she has many ways of going into Rest, and yet they're diverse and specific enough that they aren't the norm in a typical match, and successfully pulling a Rest confirm off still feels like an accomplishment instead of a foregone conclusion. Many confirms demand tight spacing and precise percentages, and the consequences for missing are, of course, extremely high, so they're not instantly accessible, but also by no means are invalid to go for. Rest has become quite an iconic Smash move, and Ultimate did a great job warping Jigglypuff's moveset around it in a way that makes sure it's represented well, but still requires a lot of skill to take full advantage of. The one outlier that still exists as far as I'm concerned is Sing, which in Ultimate leads directly into Rest regardless of when an opponent is caught in it. In isolation, this is fine. Sing is another very high-risk, high-reward option to go for raw, and even its ability to checkmate opponents in some tech chase scenarios is a relatively specific, albeit certainly good, application. But jab blocks, something that Jigglypuff has multiple ways of setting up that work for a long time and are easy to do, well, those lead into Sing. Massive punishes for a single missed tech used to be par for the course in Smash, but Ultimate was the first game which made a serious effort to cut down on these, and it was an effort I feel was fully warranted. If there is to be one character left who can still do this, then an Extreme Glass Cannon does make sense, although I personally still wouldn't advocate for it, but this highlights just how tricky a frame 2 insta-kill attack can be to design around, and how gracefully the developers navigated the task overall. You may notice this is a recurring theme in the video. I have an admiration for brave move designs that could easily go astray and ask tough questions of the developers, which are then answered successfully. Before we wind down, I wanted to include a few honorable mentions, the first of which is Kirby's Inhale. I maintain that this is the single most important special move in Smash history for its ability to let newcomers sample the entire roster through the lens of a fan-favorite, beginner-friendly character. A lot of lifelong Smash fans have been created thanks to Inhale. It's absolutely worthy of its own segment, and would have gotten one if I didn't already have a full video on the channel completely dedicated to the move. The same applies to the Falcon Punch, an attack I've always admired for its unabashedly silly nature faster, and one which Ultimate gave some much needed oomph back to after the previous few entries needlessly toned it down. Pit's neutral special, Palutena's Bow, is a creative and skill-testing projectile that can be pushed hard without ever feeling unreasonably oppressive. But I do miss its Brawl incarnation with the faster, more persistent, and more controllable arrows. Those were more fun. Speaking of fun, Ganondorf's Flame Choke is one of the most entertaining side specials in the game when used as a command grab, and I love the constant interactivity it creates between the Ganondorf player and their opponent. The fact that it puts him into freefall in the air, though, feels like a relic from a bygone age on a character who really can't afford additional handicaps. I'll complete the Triforce by mentioning Link's Remote Bomb, one of, if not the most creative and skill-testing item spawn moves in the entire series, although again I've given it quite a bit of attention elsewhere on the channel. Mewtwo's Confusion is a densely packed move that provides projectile protection, air mobility, pressure on platforms, and the ledge as a command grab, and later on this transitions into a kill confirm, and yet it still feels fairly well balanced overall, an impressive feat. And finally, the Shuriken of Light wielded by Mii Swordfighter surprisingly enforces a lot of the same fundamentals-oriented spacing that I praised Terry's Power Wave of all things for. While Mii Swordfighter isn't locked into the ground in the same way, Shuriken of Light has a potent confirm into Power Thrust, an attack that does need to be done standing to reach its full potential. This confirm similarly needs to be initiated from a precise distance, and while Mii Swordfighter gets a better general purpose harassment projectile than Terry, they pay for this in close range safety, as connecting a star point blank won't cause the opponent to flinch. I briefly spotlighted the Shuriken of Light a while back, and at that point it was considered a novelty that I had trouble even finding footage of, but has seen a minor renaissance recently with players showing a bit of renewed interest in the character, and interestingly, these players are often now opting for a more nimble projectile, rather than the lumbering Gale Strike that was an indispensable staple of the character's meta for so long. I welcome this wholeheartedly, as I think the Shuriken of Light is a great way to approach projectile design, even if giving this particular character such prominent zoning capabilities was a bit of a strange choice. Thanks for watching, everyone. There were so many more moves I was at least considering for this video, but had to draw the line somewhere, so please let me know any that you think are highlights. Likes and comments are appreciated. You can check out more videos from both my channels here, and patrons, YouTube members, and Twitch subs get some cool perks. Later, people.